It is Monday, it is 7 o'clock here at the Milwaukee Makerspace, so that means it is time for Model Monday. That magical time of the week when we sit down together and share a cup of hot cocoa and model things in Fusion 360. Of course, if you're joining us virtually, you cannot have hot cocoa, and if you're joining me here in person, not sharing my hot cocoa, because I don't know where you guys have been. So get your own hot cocoa. Okay, so today will be the last of our Christmas projects for the month of December. We're going to revive a project that we did all the way back in 2017 in this class, which is a project I called the AnyBox. And basically the idea here is, you know, we make a lot of cool stuff here at the Makerspace. Here's something I pulled off of our pottery wall. So if you're short a gift for somebody, we've got a lot of pots for sale over in the Mr. Rogers Pot Shop here in the Milwaukee Makerspace. And unfortunately, there are no boxes with any of those pots. And a lot of the stuff that you get, that you make, doesn't have a box. So you got to wrap it somehow. And it's much easier to wrap a box than it is to wrap a mug or a bowl or a random project you made here. So the idea is we make custom, laser cut boxes. Here is a box, and this box I call the AnyBox because you can change its sizes by changing these parameters here. So I've got a length parameter, a width, a height, and then a material thickness parameter here. And I can change those measurements based on the gift in front of me, and then push OK, and then I have a new box that I can laser cut out and fold up and stick my gift in and then wrap it. So without further ado, let's kind of just jump in. So I'm going to close my AnyBox project here. Let's choose to save it just in case. And I'm going to open a new document here. So I'm going to come up to my new design plus button up here in my tabbed workflow up here at the top. And I've got a blank document open here. So now we can start by creating a sketch. You know, in general, we start by creating sketches, and then we take those sketches and we turn them into three-dimensional shapes. And we're going to do that same procedure here. So I'm going to click on my Create menu, and then, you know what? Let's pause. Before we create our sketch, let's create some parameters first. So I mentioned we were going to use, this is going to be a parametrically driven box. So if we first click on the Modify menu here, and we scroll down to the penultimate option in this menu list here is Change Parameters. If we choose this Change Parameters option from our Modify menu, we get our parameters window that opens up here. And now this is pretty much empty because there are no, we've drawn nothing so far. But we can enter some user parameters, and that's exactly what we want to do here. So we're going to hit the little plus icon in that user parameters cell of this little kind of spreadsheet looking thing, and we get our add parameter window here. And now we can specify the name of this parameter. So I'm going to have 4 parameters. This one is going to be called my height. So I'm just going to type in height here. I tend to think in freedom units, so I'm going to keep my unit of measurement inches here. So, but feel free if you are one of the people who believes that international standards exist, that you can use them. I will not stop you. And the expression here I'm going to enter in is, let's say, 6 inches, because that will totally fit this cup in it. And then I'm going to say OK. So now we've got our first user parameter here. We're going to enter 3 more. So I'm going to hit the plus button again. I'm going to need a parameter that's called my width. and my width is maybe going to be like 4 inches. And another user parameter, and that's going to be my length. And that's going to be like, I'm going to make it 5 inches. In fact, I'm going to make sure that I make all these measurements different. Now, even if you want to make a square, a cube, even if you wanted to make a cube for your box, I would suggest making these all different parameters. And that being said, it'll just be easier to keep in our head, straight in our head later, what the length is and what the height is and what the width is, because we're going to be calling out these variables like height instead of calling out a unit like inches. And it'll just be easier to see visually if you called out the right one, depending on the things that are appearing in front of you. So I would encourage you to make them all different numbers. You can change them to be all the same after the fact, but let's start with them all being different. And then the last unit, or the last parameter that I want here, is a material parameter. And this material parameter is going to be the thickness of the material that we're working with. This will be an important unit for us later. So if you got a piece of cardboard that, you know, is 1/8 of an inch thick, maybe you've got like cardstock. I'm imagining, I think I made these out of cardstock the first time around. So it was like a real thick paper. So like a 32nd is what I called it. You can also type in fractions here. So I could type in a 32nd of an inch. Just do 1/32, and that would give me a 32nd of an inch. Or I can 0.625.
It's a 16th.
Oh, that's a 16th.
32nd is 0.03125.
Thank you. All right, cool. Or like I said, you could just go and make Fusion do the math for you. But you know, if you have Mike in your class, you don't need to have Fusion do the math. You can have Mike do the math. Excellent. All right, so I'm gonna hit OK here, and I'm just gonna like leave this up on the screen for a second, just so you can kind of see, give you guys at home some time to enter in 4 user parameters here. We've got a height parameter, a width, a length, and a parameter called the material, which is the thickness of the material that we're going to be working with. I need like Jeopardy music or something like that I can add in here when I'm giving people time. Are you guys here good? Mm-hmm. You guys are good at home? Good? Thumbs up? Thumbs up at home, Brian? You're good? Cool? All right. Adam and Charles, I'm going to assume you guys are good too. All right, perfect. All right, excellent. So I'm going to click OK. And now we can draw our first, do I want to do that? Actually, I think I wanted to have one more little setup thing. So normally when we're drawing here in Fusion, we are in this solid workspace here. Coincidentally, our January project is going to live a lot in this Surface workspace. So if you're interested in Surface, join us in January. But today, we're going to be bouncing over to the sheet metal area. And we have one more parameter that we need to set up here. So in addition to the height and length and width, we need to set up a sheet metal rule. So we need to tell Fusion basically what kind of sheet metal we're using. And that is to say that we're not using sheet metal, but it doesn't really matter. So we're going to go to this Modify in our sheet metal tab here. We'll come down to the Modify menu and choose the sheet metal rules here. And now I have probably more options here than you guys do if you haven't not used sheet metal before, but I'll make a new one just like you would have to. So in order to make a new sheet metal rule, if you hover over an existing rule and then hit the new rule option that pops up next to it. So, and next to any one of these here, we'll have a new rule option that pops up next to it. And now we've got our new rule window, and now we can call this something. So I've called it cardboard before. In fact, I don't have one called cardboard here. Cardboard. And then we can give it a thickness, and the thickness of this cardboard is a 32nd of an inch for myself. But you know, feel free to make it whatever thickness you want. Our K factor is going to be half of that. Usually for most materials, our K factor is half of our material thickness. So if it wasn't a 32nd, it's a 64th. Now you can, like I said, you can do math here too. So if you're like, oh, 0.03125 is how thick my material is, I can just say, hey, divide that by 2, please. Oh, I lied. I can't do math in this K factor. It won't let me do pluses or minuses. It only lets me type in numbers here. So half of 0.03125 is like practically nothing. 0.01725?
0.015625.
5625. Thank you, sir. So that's a teeny ass number. And then the gap here, this seam gap, is going to be the same as our material thickness. And then that's just kind of a general rule of thumb here. Do I have a bend? Oh, and look, it was set to thickness already. So here, this option here where they're saying, hey, this gap is called thickness, they're referencing this thing called thickness right up here. Similar to how we were referencing a user parameter, you can apparently reference this thing called thickness as well. You know, I wonder if we can do that when we're drawing stuff. I'm going to try that. Okay, so now we've got that sheet metal rule set up. Now we could say close, and now we can actually make a drawing. Finally, 18 minutes in, we get to draw something. All right, so I'll click on the Create menu here, and then come down to the Create Sketch option. Now once I choose to create a sketch, I gotta pick a drawing surface to draw on here. So we've got these 3 yellow imaginary surfaces out in our workspace here, and I can pick one of these 3 imaginary workspace to start my 2-dimensional drawing on, right? So I'm going to go ahead and choose the one between my blue and my red axis here. It's my front. And when I do that, I'll spin around and I'll be looking right down at this 2-dimensional surface. And we see I've got all my drawing tools up here at the top. And all I need to do is draw a box. So I'm going to come to the Create menu and come down to Rectangle. And then I'm just going to choose a 2-point rectangle. You could make a center rectangle if you really wanted to, but I'm going to choose a 2-point rectangle here. I'm going to click to place the first point of my rectangle right at my origin. So right at the middle of this workspace here where my axes converge. I'm going to click to place the first point, and then I'm going to move my mouse out. And now here is where we would normally start typing in some numbers, right? So like I would type in like 5 inches, and then I would hit my tab key and type in 4 inches, and start making my shape that way. But we've got...
What did you do to get to the rectangle?
Oh, so I went to Create, and then Create Sketch.
Oh, okay.
And then we've got these 3 drawing surfaces that we can pick from here. So you just need to select one of them. It doesn't really matter which one you pick, but you just need to select. This is like a 3-dimensional world we're kind of looking at, right? Mm-hmm. And these 3 yellow squares here are like imaginary 2D surfaces that we can start our drawing on. So like in this room, you could have just started sketching something in midair, but you could start drawing on this wall. You should not draw on this wall because this is the makerspace and walls are not for drawing on. Those three surfaces are kind of like the walls and the ceiling.
You have to click on the plane.
Oh. Oh.
Cool. So now all the tools at the top have changed. So we're now in our sketching environment here. So we've got our sketch palette here, and that's how you know that you're what's known as editing a sketch. So now that we're editing the sketch, we can create some geometry on it. So in this Create menu, I'm going to come down here to this rectangle option, and I'm going to choose this 2-point rectangle. Fusion is great about tooltips. So if you're ever not sure what you're supposed to be doing, if you just stop moving your mouse, it's going to tell me what to do, which is great. I'm good at following directions. So it says, hey, I'm supposed to place the first corner. So I'm going to click one time and place that first corner. And now if I just stop moving my mouse again, it says, oh, I'm supposed to specify the size of a rectangle. So if I move my mouse up, now I could specify that size. And we could type in a unit here, or we have specified user parameters that we're going to use. So instead of typing in like 6 inches, I could type in one of my user parameters that I name. So like this is going to be my height. So if I start typing in height, then I get that height user parameter, and I can hit enter to select it. And now if I hit the tab key, I bounce back and forth between my 2 units of measure here. And let's call this my width. So I've got a height and a width, and I've entered those both in, and it goes ahead and converts those to whatever their inch measurement is. But if you double click on those measurements, in addition to kind of like moving them around, you can put these measurements wherever you want them to be. You can double click on them and it sees like, oh look, that's my width. That's what I'm doing there. So once we've got our height and our width, we can go ahead and say finish sketch. Now, some of you may know that 2 things will happen as we start creating sketches. So one of those things is over in our browser. So the browser is this thing that's kind of lives on the left side of our screen here. This browser has got now a sketches folder in it. And if I spin down that sketches folder, I'm going to go ahead and delete one of them because I only actually made one. So we've got this sketch here that's called Sketch 2. And I can go ahead and name that. So if I click one time and then pause and click again, it lets me rename that. And people who are longtime comers of this class know that I'm fanatical about naming things sometimes. Alright, so we've named our box. It's a box, look at that. The other thing that happens as we draw things is we get some icons that appear at the bottom of our screen. I'll come back to these later, but know that these icons will start stacking up on top of each other. It's kind of a timeline of events that happen to make our thing that we have in front of us. Right now it's just a sketch, so that's all we see. Alright, so now we're going to get real used to the command that we pretty much use, the only command we need in this sheet metal area almost, the Flange Command. Basically everything in sheet metal is a Flange Command. You can make flat things, or curved things, or right angle things, or 120 degree things, all with the Flange Command. It's amazing how they just packed it all into one tool. So if we just choose from that Create menu in our sheet metal workspace here, that Flange Command, Now we just have to hover over that box that we made and click on it. So this flange in this case is making ourselves a flat piece of sheet metal of whatever sheet metal rule we choose here. So the thickness, if I zoom in, you can see it does indeed have thickness. And the thickness of this material is determined by the sheet metal rule that you choose here. So that's why we went ahead and picked that ahead of time. So if I say, oh, this is hardboard, you know, this is the thickness of that hardboard rule that I specified. If I say, oh, it's cardboard, then this is the thickness of that cardboard rule that I specified there. Does that make sense? Cool?
I'm still trying to
Good.
make a rectangle. I don't know what happened with the dimensions.
So yeah, so now you can just let go of your mouse. And now you can type in like your width. There you go. Excellent. Now hit the tab key. And now you got your height that you can enter in there. You know, so here's the thing that I always forget to mention to people. If you go to the document settings there, right now your units is set to millimeters. You can change that to inches.
Oh,
And then you're kind of zoomed way in. So now you can zoom out and there you go. Now you got your box.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. The thing that I always forget to mention to new people is when you first open Fusion, the document settings here has defaulted to millimeters because literally everybody uses them except for us Americans. We still use a measurement that's based on somebody's big toe, I guess. But I grew up with big toe measurements, or freedom units as I call them, so I'm stuck with them. We tried to use a metric system when I was a kid. It totally failed. Totally failed. All right, now, as I was saying, so now that you got a box, now we can click on the Create menu and come down to the Flange command here. And I'm going to hover over that box and it kind of highlights blue, and I'll just click on it. And there I've got a box, or I've got something highlighted. I've got a profile selected, it says here. And I can change my sheet metal rule to be that cardboard option that I just made. And then I'll click OK. Alright, so now in addition to that sketches folder, we've got a bodies folder here. And that body has our body in it. This body is going to become our box after a lot more flanges. Like 6 more flanges or something like that. And in order to make that box, we're going to use that flange command several times. So if I come over here to this Create menu, and then I choose this flange option again, if I zoom in and I hover over, I'm picking the side of the edge that's towards me. So this is the side that's away from me, this is the side that's towards me. And I'm going to do that on both sides of this box here. So I'm going to come in and pick both of those lines, and now I've got a little blue arrow, and if I just drag this blue arrow towards me, it makes myself a nice little sheet metal bend there. Now the distance that we're going to go is going to be the other user parameter, the one user parameter that I have not used. And I'm going to guess that I have not used length yet. So if you used width the first time, you use length this time. This is why I choose to make them all different measurements to begin with, because now I can see if I'm choosing the right one, because if I was not choosing the right measurement, they would be the same size. And you can see that this leg is longer, so I know that I'm using the right parameter here. All right, so we've made our first flange here, and we've got the length specified literally for me as length. And I'm going to say OK. Now I'm going to do that one more time here to kind of enclose our box. So if we come up to the Create menu again, and we choose the Flange option, I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to again pick on like the inside corner of this one box. So it's the inside corner here, and I'm going to pull it out towards my other object here. And now I'm going to enter in the distance here for the height is going to be, I believe, width. Yes, okay, good. So here, if I'd entered the wrong one, length, you go, oh, it went way past where I wanted it to go, right? So I entered the wrong one, so now you know that it's like, oh, its width is the one that I want here. And I'm going to look at it from the top down here and just kind of verify that it is indeed stopping before it gets to my corner. I don't want these things to be joining each other. Does anybody have theirs joining each other at this point? Cool. That's great news, because it allows me to point out something that I totally forgot to mention the first time around. But it's a teachable moment. This is a wonderful thing. So down at the bottom, you know that we've got this kind of timeline of events that have been happening. At the bottom here, we've got our sketch, where we made our sketch the first time, and if I click on it, you can see, oh, look at sketch highlights. The next thing that happens is we made that flange, which is that flat surface. And the second thing that happened was we made that our first two bends in this box, right? If I right-click on any of these items in my timeline and go back to Edit Feature, now I'm going back in time to when I was doing this operation, and we can point out something that I forgot to mention that is very crucial, that is the bend position. So I can choose to bend this on the inside or on the outside, and there's a really terrible illustration that it doesn't show you very large here, but if you choose to bend those, I believe on the outside, I believe that's what we want to do. If we change those to outside, it was yours are probably set to inside. So if we change those to outside, then we'll be good there. And now I can say OK. And now when our third bend happens, then they do not touch each other. Now we want to make one more flange here because.
It looks like mine are still touching each other.
Oh, let's take a look. So you're set to outside. Okay, cool. So if you say OK there, and then right-click on that and say Edit Feature, set that to outside as well. Still touched. Try deleting that feature. Okay, cool. Let's try and do it one more time. And like not want to look at it a little bit more three-dimensionally. So like the little navigation cube up here, you can click and drag on that. Or you can like click and drag. And then you can kind of see it a little bit more three-dimensionally there. That'll work, yep. There you go. And then where's that little blue arrow? Oh, we just want one. We just want to pick one of those. There we go. Where's the little... Oh, we gotta hit the Flange Command. There we go. And you've got it selected already. So now zoom out a little bit. There we go. There's your little blue arrow. Now you can click and drag on that. And you can specify that other dimension there that was either length or width, probably. There we go. Now we're good, right? Yeah, okay, cool.
Carl,
Yeah.
question. Okay, on the four flange,
Uh-huh.
I did the outside bend and it wanted to intersect. Was the little angle thing came up and I set it to like 89.9 to give me a little gap. How should I have set it to give me
On this very last one we're
on
doing
the very
here?
last one?
On this very last one, so I'm going to go and grab my Flange Command here, and I'm going to pick the inside edge here of this. This is the very latest flange that we bent around here, so we just bent this side around here. And if I come in here and choose that inside edge, instead of choosing the bend position as outside, here I'm going to choose it as inside. So now if I choose to make that inside, now when I come and look straight down at it, you can see that
Okay,
they're not touching.
Okay, that doesn't answer the question. How did you get the gap between the fourth flange and the original first surface?
Oh, this
That gap right there.
that gap right there.
Yeah,
So
how did you get that?
so that happened for me naturally. So when I chose to make the first, all these bend positions are made on the outside. That happened for me naturally. Did that not happen for you naturally? Where you've got the gap there?
It started from the other corner, maybe.
Oh, I don't think so.
Because I did the length and I got the,
That's unselected. Yeah, if I choose the inside corner there. Yeah, let me come take a look what you got going on.
okay, I was using the inside corner on all of those. Let me try it. This is a wild ass guess here.
That's the outside corner. Yes.
Right. That's what I'm. Flange. Outside. Okay, now I'm choosing this one. Flange. Outside. And it does connect. But see right here you have the little Uchi angle. So if I click on that, I can go to like 88.9. That gives me a happy little gap right there. But
Yeah.
that's the only way I can get the gap. So I'm asking, how did you get a gap?
Yeah, mine just appeared there. So I don't. So we definitely want to have a gap. And I'll tell you what we want to do if you're going to try to get this gap here, and you're not getting it naturally, I would say that we should try doing some math in our measurement unit here. So instead of a width, you could try a width minus your material. If you subtract your material thickness from your width, the key is you don't want to have those things touching. So it may just take a little fudging like that. I don't know why we're both doing it the same way and we'd have different results, but sometimes Fusion is weird. Or we could have version differences going on here somehow. But I would say,
that works.
yeah, subtract your material thickness maybe. So we just had an issue here live in person where somebody was doing this measurement and getting these walls were touching, and we don't want that specifically, so we just had to subtract our material from it, and you can see it bounces back a little bit. So if you have that as an issue, you could try subtracting your material from your distance there. We're going to be doing that later in the course of the drawing. I just didn't expect to do it this early. So I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to make one more flange here to close this out. So I'll click on Create. And then I'm going to grab my Flange tool again. This time we're going to again specify the inside edge. And this is the edge that I just made. So this is my brand new edge, my brand new flange. And this time, instead of outside, because if I choose outside on this, for me, I end up with some edges that are touching and overlapping, and that will not unfold properly. My bend position I'm going to set to inside. And that'll give me a properly fitting box here. This gap, if you remember, is a 32nd of an inch, and in cardboard, that is plenty of tolerance. Those things will glue together just fine. So, and for a length here, or a height, I should say, for this measurement, I'm going to say 1 inch. You could specify it as some percentage of your height or your width if you wanted to, and then it would change constantly, but I'm just going to type in 1 because it just needs to be enough for us to glue together. And then I'm going to say OK. Yeah, I'm going to say OK here. Alright, so now let's create the bottom of our box. So we'll do that, you guessed it, with the Flange command. So I'm going to rotate down using my navigation cube up in my top right hand corner. I can kind of click and drag and rotate that so I can see the bottom of my box. And now the bottom of my box I'm going to close in with some flanges. So if I click on the Create menu and I choose the Flange command here, if I specify the inside edge of this side and the inside edge of the opposite side, so I've got the inside edges of two opposite sides selected here. Now when I grab my little bendy tool thing here, or my little arrow, it drags them inward, right? This is another one of those occasions where we'll have to look at the side, and if these flanges are intersecting with the body here, right now I'm set, my bend position is set to inside, and I've got a little intersection, so I'm going to change that to outside. And hopefully I'll be good to go there. Hopefully. And now my height, the distance that I'm going to extrude these, or bend them, or flange them, I guess you could say, is going to be either my width divided by 2 or my length divided by 2. Okay, yeah, it's my width. So I'm going to take my width, and I'm just going to say width divided by 2. I could put some spaces in there so that's easier to read.
You know what I would have done wrong if they don't meet up correctly?
Well, it could be you need to use your length in that measurement then.
Oh, I mean in terms of like if you're looking at it straight on, slightly, slightly offset.
Oh, so that is totally fine.
No. Okay.
So, you know, it's just your this is your bent side, and if you go over to this side, this one does not have a bend there. So it's just one of those two faces that will have that issue going on.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, that's a 32nd of an inch, which is totally fine in cardboard. You'll be good there. All right, so we've got our bottom, first section of our bottom set, right? I'm going to say OK here. And now we can make the other section of our bottom here, but oh gosh, do I need to... I hope I didn't make a mistake already. Oh no, I can see it. Okay. So, in order to make the next section of our bottom, we need to extend up a couple of edges. So, I'll show you what would happen if we don't do this. If I just try to make this flange the same way I made the, oh boy, that's interesting. Create a flange. Oh, look at that. I've got some joined edges there. So I just tried to make a flange and I realized I've got some joined edges here. So I'm going to need to take a step backwards because apparently we're going to need to do this again. So I'm going to delete that last flange that I just made. I tell you, when I do these before class, it always goes real smoothly. We need to make a couple of extrusions here. So I need to create some distance here between the flange that we're making and the edge of our surface. So if I come up here to the Create menu and choose the Extrude option, I'm going to choose that edge over there. I guess I shouldn't say edge. This face over here, which is kind of the side of my piece of sheet metal. And then I'm going to choose the face that is the opposite side of the sheet metal there. And I'm going to extrude this up a distance of 0.01. Because I just need to create the tiniest little raise in that wall there. So if I zoom in, you can see I'm raising it up just slightly, 0.01 inches. And I'm going to say OK. And now if I grab my flange tool one more time, now those edges, so this is that operation that I just did where I choose those inside edges of both of those, and I extrude this in. This is that distance of width divided by 2. Now I don't have edges that are touching each other. Edges that are touching each other are bad. So we're going to do that operation one more time. And here, Harvey, this is that issue that you were saying is I've got a little gap here, and I do not have a little gap up here, and that is because of the edges that I chose to expand to make a flange out of. It's just, you know, one of them goes all the way to the edge and the other one doesn't, because there's a little like corner piece that it cuts out here when you're making sheet metal stuff. Alright, so we're going to do that same operation again. So we're going to extrude the two opposite faces. So this face here and this face way over here. We're going to extrude them up just a little bit. So I'll go ahead and grab my extrude option. And I'm going to grab both of my little edge walls there. And this one is going to have to go up a little bit more. So that other one went up 0.01. I'm going to try starting with 0.03 here. And hopefully that'll be good. I'm going to hope that having those things touching is not going to mess up my day, and it's not. Okay, cool. So, I just had to jump ahead a little bit because I saw whenever I see touching edges in sheet metal, I go, oh, is it joining those things together? Please do not do that. I don't want you to join together. Alright, so I extruded it up 0.03. Now I'm going to grab my flange tool again. Oh, look at that. Is it selecting that whole thing or not? It's selecting that whole thing. So I'm only getting half of my sheet metal because I've got edges that are touching here. And the way that I'm gonna get around that is in this last operation that I did here, this where I made this bottom section, because this is where I've got an edge that's touching this face here. These things touching is not good in sheet metal. So if I edit that feature, we have been making these edges the full width of the edge, and they do not need to be the full width of the edge. So I can take one of them and I can say, hey, I'd like to have two offsets here, and it lets me just take this and drag it inward. So now it's not the full width, it's just a percentage of that, or a small part of that width, and I can just change this measurement to something minuscule, or you can make those edges line up with each other there. So that's a way to get around those edges not lining up that we had before. And I'm fine on this side. Those edges are not touching. So I just had to drag in one of those arrows. Alright, there we go. So now we've got edges that are not touching again, and that's a good thing. And I can grab my flange tool, and now we should be able to come in here and pick these two edges, and if I drag them in, we can see that my things are touching. However, we're going to go ahead and fix that. We're going to go ahead and fix that later. So right now I can see that my flange is interacting with each other, and that's going to be a problem for the unfolding process. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and join these things together, or not join them together, bring them close enough so they're in the center. So this is going to be my length, right? going to be my length divided by 2. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Now, like I said, my edges are, my flanges are clearly interacting with each other, so I just have to change this extrusion where I extruded this little height here. I just have to change that extrusion to be a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger than that. There we go. So now I have a nice little gap in there and things are not touching each other. And we've got an almost complete box. The last thing we need to do on our box is just make a top here. And I'm going to make that top with one final flange. So I'll go over here to the Create menu and I'll choose the flange option. And now we just have to make the top flange of our box just by picking on one side, dragging it over here, ensuring we don't have things that are touching, specifying a distance of, I don't know, let's call it width. That was the correct answer. And then say OK. And there we go. There is our box. Now, we may have some questions. I kind of did those last little bits kind of quick, but do you guys have, were you guys successful at home? Did you guys have a...
I think so. I want to take it apart and do a layout to see it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so, you know, like you said, the next part is to do a layout, right? And do a flat pattern, and that is really the key. And the first time I did this is where I found out that those edges touching, bad news. So to unfold this into a flat pattern, in the Modify menu, we can say, oh, is it in the menu? Nope, it's in the Create menu. In the Create menu, if you come down to Create Flat Pattern, assuming none of your edges are touching each other, and in fact, if you look down at your timeline in the bottom here, if some of your flanges are yellow, that's a indication that you've got some overlapping stuff there. So if you've got yellow flanges, yellow flange icons, you might have some touching edges. But we have to click a stationary face here, so you really just have to pick any face. And then say OK. Oh, I got an error. More info. Alright, I'm going to say Finish Flat Pattern. Let's try deleting this last one. Let's delete this flat pattern. Can I make a flat pattern now? There we go. Alright, so something about my last flange that I made was touching. So this very last flange here, something about the way I made this was touching something else in a way that it didn't think was friendly. So I'll try that one more time and see if I can find where it's touching. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's touching. Oh yeah, but it's right on top of it. So what I'll need to do here is do that same trick where that I did in the bottom. So I'll come over to the edge and I'll extrude out this little piece just a fraction of an inch, 0.01 inches. And now that I extrude this edge up just a little bit, now I can use my flange tool and drag this over. And I should be typing in my measurement here, which is width. All right, so now, hopefully, I'm going to delete this. I can come over and say create, and then create a flat pattern. And now I can specify a stationary face and say OK. And then it unfolds it flat there. So I'm going to hang out for a minute. I'm going to stop this recording and tell people to join us next week for January surface modeling fun, where we're going to make a weird and ridiculous project using surface modeling. And I'm going to encourage everybody to hang out because we had some hiccups in this process. So we're going to back up and I'm going to help you guys out a little bit here. So I'm going to say good night and stop the